Were you alive when the war started? If yes, type "Yes, I was alive" in the comments. Let's see who was there. After this video, watch 2 or 3 more long videos on our channel or on YouTube. You may receive good news in 2 days. If you do, come back and comment, "We receive good news." Like and share this video with your friends. Let's get started. They were hunting him, and every man in the tower felt it. On March 19, 1945, 140 miles southeast of Kyushu, Japan, Lieutenant Commander Eugene Fluckey peered through the periscope of USS Barb as 3 Japanese destroyers cut through the dawn mist at 28 knots, bows throwing white spray over the gray Pacific swells. Fluckey lowered the scope and glanced at the depth gauge, 60 feet. Sonar pings hammered Barb's hull like blows on metal. His executive officer froze at the chart table, pencil hovering in midair. Everyone understood the danger. 3 Fubuki-class destroyers against 1 Gado-class submarine. 5-inch guns and depth charges versus torpedoes taking 3 minutes to reach their target. The math was clear. The destroyers could close in and kill them before any torpedo hit. Doctrine said, dive deep, go silent, hope contact was lost. Evade. Survive. Fight another day. Fluckey turned from the periscope. What he said next would either define him or doom them all. "Prepare to surface," he said calmly. "Battle stations, gun action." The pencil clattered to the deck. What happened in the next 40 minutes would be studied for decades, not because it followed the rules, but because one commander realized the most dangerous move is what the enemy thinks impossible. By March 1945, American submarines had been devastating Japanese shipping for over 3 years. The numbers were staggering. Nearly 400 ships sunk, over 5 million tons lost, choking oil, food, and supplies. But one threat remained: Japanese destroyers. Their navy had become deadly at hunting submarines. Type 93 hydrophones could detect targets beyond 10,000 yards. Type 95 depth charges could crack hulls down to 300 feet. In 2 years, they sank 23 American submarines, killing over 500 men. The problem was simple. Submarines moved 8 knots. Destroyers ran 34. Once detected, stealth vanished. Survival meant diving to 400 feet, running silent, and hoping the hunters gave up before batteries died. No sane commander chose to fight. USS Barb under Eugene Fluckey's command had already made a name as one of the most aggressive submarines in the Pacific. On her 11th war patrol, she sank a Japanese aircraft carrier. On her 12th, she carried out the only ground combat operation by a U.S. submarine in World War II, landing a shore party to blow up a coastal railway. Fluckey had earned the nickname Lucky Fluckey, though his crew knew it came less from luck and more from bold, calculated risk that balanced on the edge between brilliance and death. Even for Fluckey, what he was about to attempt had no precedent in submarine warfare. Gado-class manuals were clear. Under no circumstances should a submarine surface to engage enemy destroyers. Superior speed, firepower, and maneuverability made such fights almost always fatal. The manual had been written in blood. Lessons learned from boats that never returned. Commander Richard O'Neill, skipper of USS Tang and a top submarine ace, wrote after a similar encounter, 3 destroyers working together create an impossible problem for a submerged sub. The only solution is evasion. Yet on the morning of March 19, 1945, Fluckey faced that exact impossible challenge. 3 destroyers had detected Barb at first light while she traveled on the surface. The Japanese ships immediately turned to engage, accelerating to attack speed. Fluckey crash-dived, but their sonar kept contact. Now they were closing in with a coordinated search, their propeller sounds audible through Barb's hull without hydrophones. Standard procedure meant diving deep and going silent. But Fluckey had studied tactical reports from other boats and noticed something the manual had missed: timing and surprise. Every destroyer captain assumed the submarine would run. Japanese destroyer doctrine in early 1945 reflected 3 years of successful anti-submarine operations. Their captured manual from a sunken destroyer near Saipan outlined the standard attack with precision. Once sonar detected a sub, 3 destroyers would form a triangle, 2,000 yards apart, converging at high speed to force the sub deeper. The submarine would be trapped, each position covered by a destroyer ready to drop depth charges. It was a proven system, one that had already killed American submarines. Commander Masao Kawaguchi, senior destroyer captain in this hunting group, had executed this attack pattern 17 times. He had 4 confirmed submarine kills and 3 probables. From his position on the bridge of Hatsuharu, he could read the subtle signs of submarine evasion. They always dove deep. They always tried to escape at their maximum underwater speed of 8 knots. They always headed for the nearest thermal layer or towards shallow water, where depth charges were less effective. They never, ever came back toward the destroyers. What Kawaguchi and his fellow captains could know was that Eugene Fluckey had spent 6 months studying every action report he could get from SubPOC headquarters in Pearl Harbor. He had read about USS Harder's aggressive tactics before she was lost. He had studied the rare occasions when submarines had fought back on the surface, and he had identified the critical window. It took a destroyer crew about 4 minutes to go from sonar tracking to visual contact to opening fire with their main guns. For minutes of vulnerability, when they expected the submarine to be fleeing underwater, not charging toward them on the surface with guns blazing, but that window relied on the submarine acting normally. It relied on American commanders following doctrine. It relied on fear overriding innovation inside Barb's conning tower. Fluckey could hear sonar pings intensifying. The 3 destroyers were closing their triangle. In about 8 minutes, they would be in position to start dropping depth charges. Standard procedure meant Barb would dive to 400 feet and hope to survive the first pattern, then the second, then the third, until batteries died or the hull cracked. Fluckey had done the math. At their current speed, if Barb ran conventionally, the odds of survival dropped below 40% with each passing minute. But if Barb surfaced now, while the destroyers were still 8,000 yards away and focused on sonar, expecting a target fleeing underwater, Fluckey knew they'd never expect it. They're hunting a submarine. Let's give them a destroyer, he said to his executive officer. The XO stared. Sir, we have a 4-inch deck gun. They have 5-inch guns and anti-aircraft batteries. They're not aimed at the surface, Fluckey said. And they won't be for the next 4 minutes. That's all we need before we continue. I'd love to know, where are you watching from? And what do you know about submarine warfare in the Pacific? Drop a comment below, and let me know if you've heard about Eugene Fluckey and USS Barb before. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into World War II naval history, hit that subscribe button. These stories take serious research to get the details right, and knowing you're out there makes it all worthwhile. Eugene Bennett Fluckey was not a reckless commander. At 32 years old, he had graduated from a naval academy in 1935 and spent 9 years mastering naval tactics before taking command of Barb. He had studied Mahan's theories on naval warfare, studied Clausewitz, but most importantly, he had learned that doctrine exists to be broken when survival demands it surface the boat. All ahead flank. Make ready the 4-inch gun. The order passed through the submarine like electricity. Men moved to their stations with the precision earned from 8 months of relentless training under a commander who drilled them endlessly. The ballast tanks roared as compressed air forced seawater out. Barb angled upward. 20 seconds later, the conning tower broke the surface. Spray cascaded off the hull as the submarine rose like a breaching whale. The forward deck cleared the water, and the 4-inch deck gun emerged. Seawater streaming from its barrel. The gun crew scrambled up through the forward hatch. Gunner's mate First Class Paul Saunders reached the weapon first, breaking the barrel seal, while his crew of 6 took their positions. They had drilled this hundreds of times, but never in combat. Never with 3 enemy destroyers bearing down inside the conning tower. Fluckey had the periscope up. He could see all 3 destroyers clearly now. Range, 7,200 yards and closing. They were still in their anti-submarine pattern, bows cutting through the swells at attack speed. They hadn't seen Barb yet. Their lookouts searched for periscopes, not for a surfaced submarine charging at 21 knots range to nearest destroyer. Fluckey called. 7,000 yards and closing fast. Sir Barb's 4 Fairbanks Morse diesel engines screamed at maximum power, driving her forward at top surface speed. Every second added another 35 yards between Barb and the position the Japanese sonar tracked 60 feet below. The confusion would last maybe 2 more minutes, then someone would notice. Then the destroyers would turn, and the 5-inch guns would train on Barb target the lead destroyer. Saunders shouted from the deck, "Commence firing," when in range. Flucky ordered. The 4-inch gun had an effective range of 4,500 yards, maximum 6,000. Against destroyer armor, it was almost useless, unless you hit the bridge, the director, or the fire control systems of the lead destroyer. Hatsuharu, the sonar operator, was the first to realize something was wrong. His contact had vanished from the scope. Submarines didn't just disappear, he checked his gear again. Sure, it had to be wrong. On the bridge, Commander Kameguchi was studying the plot when a lookout suddenly shouted. Kameguchi spun and raised his binoculars to where the sailor pointed. On the horizon, impossible yet clear, an American submarine was racing on the surface straight toward them at full speed. For 3 long seconds, Kameguchi simply stared. No submarine commander would ever do this. It broke every rule of submarine warfare. It was pure suicide. Then he saw the flash from Barb's deck gun. The first 4-inch shell screamed across the water, passing 20 yards in front of Hatsuharu's bow. 5 seconds later, the second shell landed closer. The third hit. It slammed into Hatsuharu's forward gun mount, failing to punch through armor, but smashing the gun's training gear and killing 2 crewmen. Shrapnel ripped through the gun director platform. Return fire. Kameguchi shouted, "All batteries, engage the submarine," the order threw the ship into chaos. The destroyer's main 5-inch guns were set for aircraft or targets off the side. Now they had to swing hard to port to face a threat directly ahead. Anti-aircraft crews rushed to their stations, but the submarine was still over 5,500 yards away, right at the edge of their reach on Barb. The gun crew moved like machines. Load. Aim. Fire. The 4-inch gun hurled a 33-pound shell every 6 seconds. Saunders chose targets calmly: bridges, fire control, gun mounts, anything that could slow the enemy response. The second destroyer, Yamakaze, began turning to bring her guns to bear. Her forward 5-inch mount fired. The shell splashed 200 yards short. The range was still too long. Flucky watched through the periscope as his bold gamble unfolded. Barb was now inside 5,000 yards. Close enough to damage the destroyers, but also close enough that once they organized, their firepower could tear her apart. Helm. Come left to course 270, Flucky ordered. Make ready tubes 1 through 4. This was the second phase of the plan, the moment that would be called brilliance or disaster. Barb turned, pointing her bow straight at the destroyers. Her forward torpedo tubes, loaded with Mark 18 electric torpedoes, now aimed directly at the Japanese formation. The destroyers saw the turn. They understood at once. All 3 broke formation, scattering as fast as they could. Now they faced not just a surfaced submarine firing at them, but incoming torpedoes. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. Torpedoes leapt from Barb's tubes, their electric motors leaving no visible wake. They weren't aimed at the destroyers directly, but at the water between them, to force the Japanese ships to maneuver, to make them choose between pressing forward into a spread of torpedoes or turning away. Every destroyer captain made the same choice. They turned away, all ahead flank. Flucky shouted, "Rudder amidships. Take us out of here." Barb surged forward, her diesels roaring. Her deck guns continued firing at the retreating destroyers. The Japanese ships turned back, their 5-inch guns finally opening fire. But the distance was growing. Shells splashed around Barb, geysers of white water erupting 50 yards on either side, but none struck the submarine. 10 minutes later, she had pushed the range out to 12,000 yards. The destroyers gave up the chase, returning to search for the sonar contact that no longer existed. Flucky lowered the periscope and allowed himself to breathe for days later. His action report landed on Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood's desk like a grenade. Lockwood read it twice, then called Flucky. "Personally, you deliberately surfaced," Lockwood said slowly, "while 3 destroyers were hunting you. Then you attacked them with your deck gun." "Yes, sir." "My deck gun against 3 destroyers," Lockwood set the report down. Commander, you understand this violates every tactical doctrine we have for submarine operations. I understand it violates doctrine, sir. But the doctrine assumes the submarine is trying to escape. I recognize that the destroyers were operating under the same assumption. Flucky explained what Flucky had discovered was a critical gap in Japanese anti-submarine doctrine and in American thinking. Both sides assumed a predator-prey dynamic. Submarines ran, destroyers hunted. The moment Barb surfaced and attacked, she stopped being prey. The Japanese destroyer captains had drilled for hundreds of hours in anti-submarine warfare. Depth charge patterns, sonar tracking, coordinated search procedures, but they had never trained for a submarine fighting back on the surface. With direct fire, the 4-minute window of confusion Flucky had predicted turned out to be closer to 7 minutes. In that time, Barb had closed from 7,200 yards to 4,800 yards, while the Japanese crews struggled to retarget their weapons, from underwater contacts to surface engagement. By the time the destroyer's main guns were ready to fire effectively, Barb had already scored 3 hits and was turning to launch torpedoes. Lockwood studied the report's technical details. Barb had fired 23 rounds from her 4-inch gun, scoring 3 confirmed hits on Hatsuharu and 2 possible hits on Yamakaze. None of the shells sank a destroyer. The gun lacked the power for that, but they caused casualties, damaged fire control systems, and most importantly, forced the destroyers to break their coordinated attack. The torpedo spread that followed hit nothing as well. But that wasn't the point. The torpedoes forced the destroyers into defensive maneuvers, abandoning their attack to avoid being hit. Those critical minutes allowed Barb to open the range and escape. What you did, Lockwood said finally, was exploit the gap between their expectations and reality. Yes, sir. Every tactical system has a reset time. That's the window when they're most vulnerable. Flucky replied. Lockwood authorized the report for distribution to the submarine force within 2 weeks. Every submarine commander in the Pacific read Flucky's analysis. The tactical bulletin issued in April 1945 was carefully worded. It did not recommend surface attacks on destroyers as standard procedure, but it acknowledged that unconventional tactics could create opportunities when normal evasion seemed unlikely to succeed more significantly. The action forced a reassessment of submarine armament. Flucky's report noted that if Barb had been equipped with the newer 5-inch, 25 caliber deck gun being installed on Gado-class boats, she could have inflicted serious damage rather than just disrupting the destroyer's attack. The Navy accelerated the retrofit program, equipping several Gado-class submarines with the heavier guns. The Japanese response came more slowly. Intelligence intercepts from April 1945 showed that destroyer commanders received new instructions. Maintain greater separation during attacks. Keep at least 1 ship in overwatch with guns ready for surface targets. And critically, be aware that American submarines might attempt unconventional surface attacks. The prey had learned to bite back, and the hunters had learned to be cautious. USS Barb completed her 12th war patrol on March 27, 1945, arriving at Midway Atoll with her crew exhausted, but intact. Beyond the destroyer engagement, she had sunk 3 merchant ships and a patrol craft, bringing her total tonnage sunk to over 96,000 tons, the highest total of any submarine still in active service. Eugene Flucky received the Medal of Honor for Barb's 12th patrol. Though the citation highlighted the railway demolition mission rather than the destroyer engagement, the Navy was careful about which tactics it officially praised. Still, Flucky's innovation was quietly recognized among submarine commanders as a watershed moment in tactical thinking. The immediate statistical impact was modest but noticeable. In the final 4 months of the war, 3 other U.S. submarines, Spikefish, Sandugo, and Tiru, successfully used variations of Flucky's tactic when facing destroyer attacks. All 3 reported employing aggressive surface maneuvers and deck gunfire to disrupt Japanese anti-submarine operations, surviving encounters that conventional doctrine predicted would be fatal. Destroyer kill rates against American submarines fell sharply in the war's final months, from an average of 2 to 3 submarines per month in early 1945 to 0 to 8 per month after April. While multiple factors contributed, including improved American sonar and the declining effectiveness of the Japanese Navy, Submarine commanders consistently cited increased tactical flexibility as a critical advantage. Fluckey himself survived the war, one of only 35 submarine commanders to complete more than 10 war patrols. He continued serving in the Navy, retiring as a Rear Admiral in 1972 and lived until 2007, passing away at 93. He remained firm in his belief that doctrine should guide decisions, not dictate them. The destroyer Hatsuharu, damaged in the engagement with Barb, survived until July 1945, when American carrier aircraft sank her off the Japanese coast. Commander Kameguchi survived the war and, in a 1987 interview with Naval Institute Proceedings, recalled the encounter with grudging respect. "We trained to hunt submarines. We never trained to be hunted by them." The long-term influence of Fluckey's actions extended into the Cold War. Submarine warfare doctrine in the 1950s and 1960s incorporated the principle of aggressive defense, the idea that submarines under attack should consider offensive options, not just evasive maneuvers. Soviet submarine commanders studied Barb's engagement as an example of breaking tactical paradigms. Modern submarine officers at the Naval Submarine School in Groton, Connecticut, still analyze the March 19th engagement as a case study in tactical innovation. The lesson is not that submarines should regularly attack surface ships, but that conventional wisdom becomes a vulnerability when opponents learn to exploit it. Barb herself survived the war intact and was decommissioned in 1947. She was later transferred to the Italian Navy, serving as Enrico Tazzulli until 1972. Today, her conning tower stands as a memorial at the Submarine Force Library and Museum in Groton, a silent reminder of the 263 men who served aboard her and the commander who taught them that sometimes survival means doing the impossible. At the heart of military doctrine lies a fundamental tension. Rules exist because they work. They are written in the hard lessons of past battles, paid for in blood and steel. But rules also create patterns. Patterns create predictability. And predictability creates vulnerability. Eugene Fluckey understood that diving deep and running silent was only safe because both sides agreed it was what submarines should do. The moment everyone agrees on how a battle should be fought, that agreement becomes a cage. The side that breaks the cage first gains the advantage. This wasn't recklessness. Fluckey spent months studying patrol reports and analyzing destroyer tactics, calculating the precise window of vulnerability. When he surfaced Barb that morning, he wasn't gambling. He was executing a plan built on careful observation of enemy behavior and ruthless exploitation of their assumptions. March 19, 1945. 3 destroyers hunting 1 submarine. The odds were impossible. Until the moment, they weren't. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with superior firepower or technology. It's the one who sees that what you think is impossible is simply unexpected. The one who understands that doctrine is a tool, not a cage. The one who knows rules are meant to be followed only until following them gets you killed. That morning off Kyushu, Lucky Fluckey taught the Imperial Japanese Navy that submarines could hunt back. The destroyers never expected it. That's why it worked. If you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, I'd appreciate it if you liked this video and subscribed to the channel. There are dozens more untold stories from World War II that deserve to be remembered, and I'll be bringing you a new one every week. What should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below.